To start a resting chamber experiment in AutoResp 3, the required equipment must be listed in the Devices menu, and you must have created your setup in the System Designer. Also, your oxygen sensors must be calibrated in the Calibration menu. For help on this, please watch the tutorial videos or the relevant quick guides. For demonstration purposes, we will be running in demo mode, so that the demo you see here are not true data. We will be running a setup with 4 resting chambers and 2 types of water quality controls. So once everything is ready, enter the Experiment menu. The first screen you see is the Setup tab. Notice that the content in the different menus in AutoResp 3 is often divided into these types of tabs that you find at the top here. Simply click on each tab to open them. At the top, there's also a project folder location field, 2 start and stop all buttons over here, and a settings menu. The first step you should do is to select a folder for your AutoResp files. AutoResp 3 will save 3 file types per chamber: a .ar3 file, which is the one you load into the AutoResp 3 analysis menu, and 2 .csv files, a calculated data file with the _calc in its file name, and one with a _raw containing all your raw data. Next, you can consider adding a prefix or suffix to your AutoResp 3 file names in the settings menu. This could be a treatment, a species, or a trial name. Note that this information cannot be changed while an experiment is running. Now, please focus on the Setup tab. The Setup tab is where you enter the information for each chamber and control that is specific to your current experimental setup. You should go through these fields before you start logging data. At the top, you will find 4 rows with your 4 resting chambers, and then you have your oxygen and temperature controls displayed underneath. The rows are segregated into columns, and so a good place to start is simply with the name. The name shown here is the same name you input in the System Designer, but you can also change it here. These names will further show in the data files. The next column shows us that we are using real-time temperature compensation of oxygen data, and if we had chosen a fixed temperature in the System Designer, this is where you enter that temperature value. The Mode button allows you to set the desired respirometry mode for that resting chamber. It's also here that you can set your resting chamber to flush mode if you want to flush your resting chamber, and to closed mode if you want to manually enter a measure phase. The 3 intermittent respirometry modes are shown here, and you can change the mode settings if necessary. You can get more information about each parameter by clicking on the information icon. When you press OK here, the type of mode you have selected will not start until you start logging data for that resting chamber. The overview now just shows you which mode you have selected, and you can always go back and change the settings. If we want to label this swim tunnel with a treatment, we can do it here. Using treatments is a good way to group your data, as your data files will also group your data by treatments. And it does not have to be an actual treatment. The label can also be a species name or a type of group. And if you want to change the treatment, hit Edit and select the treatment you want to change. If you want to add or remove a treatment, you can do it up here. Once you have your treatments ready, enter Select and choose the treatment that should apply for this resting chamber. The treatment color will show here, and the number indicates which position this treatment has in the treatment list. Chamber volume can be entered here, and this is the internal volume of the closed resting chamber. The tube volume here is the volume of water inside the tubing used for recirculation for that specific chamber. This field is the wet weight of the animal. It's currently underlined in red, indicating that you must enter a value here in order to start an experiment. Otherwise, the Start button will remain grayed out. This is where you input the density of your animal, and if you do not know your animal's density, use 1. The software will subtract the volume of the water taken up by the fish to get the correct respirometric volume. The respirometric volume is shown here, and it's the chamber and tube volume minus the volume of the animal. The atmospheric pressure and salinity can be changed here throughout an experiment, and if you want to add a note regarding your resting chamber, enter it here. The Start button here will start data logging and the selected respirometry mode for the individual resting chamber, and it will not affect the conditions of your remaining chambers or your controls. So, before you start the chamber, make sure that you have set up your controls as well. And regarding the controls, the setup fields are similar to what you find for the resting chambers. The mode field shows us that we're using double or two-way regulation. And if you enter the regulation menu, you will see the function of each relay displayed on the PowerX4 that is assigned to this control here. A green light indicates that the relay is on. The illustration here is a good tool to use to check that your actual setup has been set up correctly. Once you have entered all the information for each of your resting chambers and controls, you are ready to start the experiment. Remember that you can start and stop the individual chambers here, one by one, whenever they're ready, or you can start and stop all of them at the same time up here. Another way to start and stop a specific resting chamber or control is in the System tab. The System tab shows you some control options, some real-time data readouts, a real-time data graph, and which hardware devices that you assigned to the specific resting chamber. You can even see the same animated illustration that you find in the System Designer. If you want to see this information for another resting chamber or control, simply select it in the tabs here. The control options here are the same you will find in the Setup tab, and so the purpose of the System tab is to allow you to monitor your data while having quick access to vital controls like starting and stopping the data logging and changing the respirometry mode. The recirculation always on toggle switch here means that the recirculation pump will be on independent of the selected respirometry mode and intermittent respirometry phases. And speaking of the intermittent respirometry phase, another useful tool appears here when an experiment is running. Phase meter shows you which phase you are in at any time. The inner blue circle shows us that we are currently in the flush phase, which is also indicated up here in the list, where you can see how much time has passed in this phase and for how long the phase is set to. You can also see the duration of the loop, which equals the flush, wait, and measure phase durations combined, and the number of loops that has passed. The timer in the middle shows you how much time is left of your current loop, and if you click on the skip icon, you will skip to the next phase. The phase meter and data in the System tab are also shown in the Status tab. The Status tab shows you the current mode state, real-time data, and information about the respirometry phases for each of your resting chambers and controls. These fields are readout only, so you cannot change anything. If you want more details about your experiment data, you can have a look at each of the data tabs. You can interact with each graph and you can select which data channels that you want to see. Notice that additional visual information is displayed on some of the graphs when only a single channel is selected. As an example, selecting a single resting chamber in the oxygen graph now shows you which phase we are currently in. And for the red measurement phase, you can even see the regression line and equation. If you want to further customize your data graph, you can do it here in the Legend panel menu. This is also where you can export a screenshot of the graph, and you can export the individual graph to Excel. If you want to change the oxygen or MO2 unit on the y-axis, you need to go back to the main menu and then change it in the settings menu. Finally, your controls will also show as tabs. The legend panel shows you the current oxygen or temperature value, the current set point, and your hysteresis value. You can change these settings using the settings icon here, as well as back in the setup or system tab. And that's it on how to run a resting chamber experiment in AutoResp 3. The saved data files named .ar3 in your project folder are the files you load into the analysis menu in AutoResp 3. Your controls named .ctrl will also show here, but you are not meant to load these into the analysis. Note that once you start data logging, logging is continuous, meaning that should your computer crash, any data logged up until that point will be saved in the data files. If you have any questions about how to run a resting chamber experiment in AutoResp 3 or about other aspects of the software, you're welcome to contact us on our website.